All right.
Well, as to far how I wound up in Aragon, my family moved here in the 1870s and lived on farms on the off the Rome Highway. And if you look at the names from that time, Wingard, Randall, Rhodes, of course, all of those were relatives of mine that came down. So my dad grew up here. My mother grew up in Greene County, Georgia, and was up here visiting her sister when she met my dad. So they got married and built a house across Rome Highway from my grandfather's house, which is still standing, by the way. And I don't know the people that live in it anymore. So anyway, my parents got married, and this would have been about 1923, I think. And had my sister a year later, and my brother 2 years after that. So they grew up there next to my grandparents, and that was basically it until 21 years later. My mom said, she told the story, that she was having problems, and so she went to the doctor. The doctor told her she wasn't having problems, she was pregnant. She told him he was crazy. She went to another doctor for a second opinion. And he told her, not only was she pregnant, she was having twins. And she said, I didn't dare go to another
We're not
doctor.
dreaming anymore like you do.
So anyway, that resulted in my brother Bill and I being born 21 years after my closest brother. So sadly, my brother Bill died when we were a week old. And so I and my brother and sister had moved out of the house, so I had the unique situation of being a twin, having a brother and sister, and being an only child at the same time. So anyway, so I grew up in this little small farm outside of Aragon. My mother was clerk in the post office, and my dad worked in the mill. And he had a large gardening that he did. He grew just various vegetables and corn and stuff like that. And so anyway, when I was 16, I started school in Aragon School. I don't remember an awful lot about first grade, except that Miss Nan Williams was my teacher, and at some time during the year, and I didn't say this earlier, but growing up, both of my grandmothers lived with us. At some time during my first year, my grandmother Rhodes died, and I remember Miss Nan came. We always referred to our teachers as Miss in their first name. Miss Nan came by the house and picked me up, and she took me to school on those days when my family was involved with the funeral and stuff. And that's basically all I remember out of first grade. I was trying to remember about the school today. I remember we used to look forward to it warm enough that we could go to school barefooted. And I remember that the little vestibule where there were steps that went up, and then you went in through the big doors that opened into the hallways of the school, was worn down in sort of an arc from all of the bare feet that had run over it all over the years.
We wasn't doing that. Is anybody down there?
And I also remembered that if you were cold or sickly and it was cold or chilly out, that the teachers would bundle you up and make you sit out on the steps in the sunshine, because they said the sunshine was good for you if you had cold or something. Let's see, second year I had Miss Ellen Morgan as teacher, and she had also taught second grade to my brother and sister over 20 years before. I don't really remember anything out of her class, but fast forward to when I was in high school, I was dating Florence White, who was her niece. And one day, Florence said to me, said, let's go over and visit Ada Island. Okay. So we go over there and we're visiting, we're sitting on the front porch, and at one point she says, oh, I've got something for you. You know what it was. So anyway, she goes and she comes back with a cigar box, hands it to me, and said, this is yours. And I'm of course mystified, and I open it up, and it's got all sorts of little things. I think it had some jacks, some marbles, some wax teeth, I think, you know, just stuff. And I said, what is this? And she said, that's all stuff I took away from you because you were playing with it when you were in my class.
You were mischievous.
Yeah. So, let's see. Don't remember a lot about 3rd grade, 4th grade. 5th grade, I had Miss Anderson. Can't remember her. She was from New York, and we all thought that she was just really different. That year at Christmas, she came in and she had a big strand of sleigh bells that she brought in. And we were just all mystified. Of course, you know, we knew the song Sleigh Bells Ring, and none of us had ever had heard sleigh bells before, so that was the big thing. I was collecting rocks at the time, and I still have a piece of petrified wood that she brought me from Arizona that year. 7th grade, we got to junior high, and wound up with Bill Cummings as teacher. And if any of you remember Bill Cummings, I'm sure it was nothing but good memories about him. He was tough as nails, but he was also really smart and really interested in teaching. Now, somebody asked some time ago, what was the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you? And I had to say this. Diane Miller she became Diane somebody else. I don't remember who it was. Anyway, she married, became an attorney, and moved to Walmart.
One Diane Locklear.
Locklear, that's it, Diane Locklear, yeah. Anyway, she had one of these gadgets that the girls used to curl their eyelashes. And, you know, I saw her with it, and I asked her, you know, class was going on, and I'd asked her what it was, and she told me and handed it to me. And I'm looking at it, and the next thing I know, Mr. Cummings is standing over my shoulder. And he said something like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just looking at this, I didn't know what it was. And he says, well, do you know what it is now? And I said, you know, I think so. And he said, okay, come with me. He took me to every classroom in that school, knocked on the door and said, can we disturb you for a minute? We've got something to demonstrate. And had me go in, tell what that was, and demonstrate how it was used to curl your eyelashes. And I don't know how many classes were in that school, but we went to every last one. And,
did you learn a lesson?
I did. I didn't mess around in class anymore. And I think maybe some other people in the class learned the same lesson. But anyway, he was really good. And then I think it was the next year that his wife came and taught English. And what I remember about her, I mean, she was really sweet, good teacher, but she was reading us something, I don't know what it was, story or something, that had the phrase in it, pigs and chickens. And when she said it, it came out chigs and pickings.
Oh, I know it.
And of course we laughed. And she tried again, and she never could get it to come out right.
You don't get over it,
And we kidded her about that, I think, as as long as we were still in school. And I don't know that she ever got where she could say pigs and chickens. But she was really, really nice. And then after we finished ninth grade, are you guys twins?
Yes.
Me too.
Are you? What is your name?
Bob Rhodes.
Come around here. Walk over there beside him.
And who are you?
Judy Pinion. You know we had the store.
Yeah.
This is Judy and Joyce
Joy.
I was
Pinion.
married to Mac
Matt.
Pinion.
Yeah. And that was the store that was up the street from our house.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Y'all was up there a lot.
These are the twins that Bob was referring to just a moment ago.
Yeah.
Here they are.
Well, sadly, my twin died when we were a week old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember your mama telling me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You
Yeah.
welcome.
Thanks a lot.
It was nice seeing you again. It's been
Likewise.
so long.
It has.
Y'all have a good day.
Oh, we miss it. Did you hear me? I said we miss eating with you.
Well, thank you.
So the other thing that happened when I was in, I guess it would be 7th grade, it was decided that I would take band instead of PE because I had been supposedly a sickly kid. And so I started with band, playing French horn, and we got to play with the Rockmart High School band on occasion. And then when it got to, I guess it was 8th grade or 9th grade,
I was just looking at the picture. I was
we had to play with the band, and so we would catch the bus and go to Rockmart and play with the Rockmart band.
What grade did you go to Rockmart? How far did Aragon go when you went there?
We went through 9th grade at Rockmart, in Aragon. And I never quite figured out why most schools, high school, is 9 through 12. And for us, we were in junior high, 7, 8, 9. And then high school, 10, 11, 12.
That's what they did at my school in Alabama. 10th, 11th, and 12th was high school. The year after I graduated, they opened a new school there, and so they brought the 9th grade into the high school then. But before that,
Same thing.
it was just 10, 11, 12 in high school.
But the Rockmart school was 9, 10, 11, 12 high school, but we didn't take
But
part
you
in
didn't
that.
go.
So, and I was trying to remember, our granddaughter now just has been going through some ceremony stuff, going from, like she went through a big one before she went to kindergarten and so forth. And I don't remember there being anything for us finishing Aragon school. It just, you went to Rockmart the next year.
I think that's a recent happening because we didn't get anything from when we went from elementary school to junior high. The only thing we got was a high school diploma. We didn't get anything in junior high.
Do you want me to tell about, I can't think of his name.
Or you can tell about anything that won't get us into legal trouble.
Okay. About Wendell jumping out the window.
I didn't mean to just push you away.
Just don't mention his last name.
We had this student in Mr. Cummings' civics class,
I can stand over here and get hit.
who,
How do you know that before?
one day Mr. Cummings is
Video. Take a movie.
asking people to turn in their homework. And this student is sitting at his desk flipping through his notebook.
Bop, bop.
And Mr. Cummins goes over and says to him, what are you doing? And he says, well, Mr. Cummins, I'm looking for my uncle. And he says, okay, did you do your homework? And he said, no, Mr. Cummins, I didn't. And Mr. Cummins says, well, if you didn't do your homework, why are you looking for it? And he said, well, Mr. Cummins said, I've been praying real hard, and I just know the good Lord's done put it in my notebook for me. Well, Mr. Cummins had this big fraternity paddle. And that's another thing I remember. I'll get to in a minute. There was a lot of corporal punishment. And with Mr. Cummins, if you didn't do your homework, you got with the paddle. And so he says to this student, he says, come up and take your licks. The student stood up, looked at Mr. Cummins, he looked out the window, didn't have any screens on the window. Next thing we knew, he had put his foot on the radiator and vaulted out the window and was halfway across the parking lot. And as far as we know, he never came back to school. Yeah, that was another thing that I remember very much, particularly with Miss Anderson. Every time you had a test or you had homework that got graded, after it was passed out, she would say, the line forms at the right. And you had to get up and stand in line and show her your paper and bend over, and however many things you missed, you got that many licks. And that was just every day's business. And my folks had always told me that if I ever got a spanking at school, I'd get another one when I got home, but that never happened. And it may have been because it was so common. You know, and it wasn't like, I never noticed any preferential, some people getting away with not getting it or whatever. It was always, okay, here's my paper, that's what you got. I sort of grew up in the post office. My mother was clerk and my great aunt was postmaster. And some years before that, before there was an Aragon, there was a little town called Hamlet. And my great-grandfather was postmaster there.
Do you know where that, was that located in the same area or was it?
It was, I'll have to draw you a map.
Okay.
It was north and south of the Rome Highway, up in that area. I don't know exactly where it was.
On Yarborough Road.
Okay, there's the game warden built a house up here on the Rome Highway, and there was a building which is collapsed now. But when I talked to him, I asked him about making pictures of it, and he said that was at one time, that building was a blacksmith shop and a school at different times. And I don't know.
Totally possible. Anyway, when my great aunt finally retired from the prison, and my mother became postmaster. One of my earliest memories is going with my dad to hang the mail. Now, my dad didn't work for the post office, but he did this every day. And what happened was the mail bag was a big canvas bag. It had leather straps on it, and on either end of it, it had this metal clip of sorts that was sort of V-shaped, sort of like a keyhole upside down. And what you would do is you would squeeze it and put it through the rings on the mail bag. And these were on a pole that was up next to the railroad tracks. So what happened was Daddy would take these and squeeze it, put the mail bag up there. So the mail bag is strung up between these two clips, and then he would swing it out so it was just about over the railroad. So when the train came through from Rome, it had an arm that was spring-loaded, and it would be out, and when it hit the mailbag, it would trigger it, and spring would go off, and it would fling the mailbag into the open door of the mail car on the truck, or the train. And supposedly what they then did, they had the mailbags for Rockmart, Dallas, and Powder Springs, whatever, the towns between there and Atlanta, all open. The mail that they got from Aragon then would be in parcels labeled for which town they went to. So they would take the one for Rockmart and throw it in the next bag so that when they got to Rockmart, they could pitch that bag off and it would have the mail from Aragon from that day in it. And at some point, the powers that be determined that that wasn't efficient enough and everything had to be sorted in Atlanta. So instead of doing that, all of the mail went to Atlanta, got sorted, and then came back. So the towns that were along that route going to Atlanta that normally got their mail the next day, it was now 2 days later. I remember at least one occasion that something went wrong and the mailbag didn't go into the mail car and it fell and went under the train tracks and got chewed up by the wheels. And there was mail spread all over the place. So the post office at that time was in a little building that was right across the alley from the company store. We had a lady that worked in the company store in the candy department. It was just to the left as you went in, Miss May Aunt Moody. And she would always, if you were a kid and went in, she'd always give you a piece of candy. And I learned years later that the company determined at some point that she never paid for that candy. And so she got fired. I thought at the time that was a bit overreach. Whatever.
Yeah, well,
And that store sold everything you can imagine. They had a butcher shop in the back that Houston McClure ran, and they sold clothes. I remember they sold shoes, other types of clothing, and of course groceries. And then and upstairs was a meeting hall where the various lodges met. The only one that I remember, there was like one of the animal ones, elks, lions or something. And then there was a woodsman of the world.
they had what was it, Red Men? Red Men?
Yes.
Red Men
Yeah.
and the Masons. I'm not sure when this Aragon Masonic Lodge was formed, but it's probably a pretty good while back.
Well, the building that the post office was in was divided in 3. On the left was the post office. And then in the middle was a cafe that was run by Tudor Elliott. And then to the right was a barber shop run by Turner Brookshire. And I was actually telling somebody this earlier today. I remember being very little and my dad would give me $1 and take me down to the barber shop. I'd get my hair cut, pay for it. With the change, I'd go in the cafe, call him on the payphone, and get a hamburger and a Coke to eat while I was waiting on him to get there. Out of my change for the $1 for getting my
I
hair cut.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
We used to get 50 cents to go to town on Saturday, and they had a matinee at 10 o'clock in the morning. We'd get in the show for 10 cents, and we'd get they had a little vending machine. You get a Coke for a nickel, a candy bar for a nickel, and when we left the show, we'd walk down the street. It was on the courthouse square. we'd walk down the street to the Blue Moon Cafe and get a hamburger and a Coke and still have a nickel left when we went home.
Yep. Yeah. As far as the cafe went, what I remember most is the African-American lady that did the cooking. Her name was Mamie. And she made the best hamburgers ever. And she also made wonderful Irish stew. And I have tried several times to recreate both of them with no luck whatsoever.
Suzanne told me one time that that lady you're talking about made the best meatloaf that you'd ever eat
That
at the
could
cafe.
well be too. The barber shop was where I had my first job as a shoe shine boy. I got a haircut every week or so as part of my payment. I got whatever I made off of the shoe shining, and I had to clean up. And it seems to me like shoe shines were a quarter. And I would, if I made $5 in a week, I was considered, I made a lot of money. And part of the cleaning up involved cleaning up in the back where they had showers. And there were a lot of people in the area that only took a bath on Saturday night to be ready for putting on their good clothes to go to church on Sunday. And we often would have people lined up to get a shower and change their clothes on Saturday night. And then, of course, people got haircuts and shaves and stuff like that. I remember, I can't remember the guy's name, but I remember visually one of the other barbers that worked there. We had a lot of people that came in that were World War II veterans, and there was a lot of talk about the war. No specifics that I remember. This just came to me. A lot of the kids that I grew up with, their dads were World War II veterans, and they had a lot of souvenirs from the war, and we would trade them. They'd bring them in, and somebody had something else, and you'd trade them around. And over the course of the time that we did this, I had a bunch of Nazi memorabilia. And I mean, if I had it today, I don't know what I'd do with it, but I remember having it. And I, not infrequently, will see a war movie and see, a German soldier portrayed, and I think to myself, well, I had one of those medals at one time. Yeah.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I'm sure somewhere on the way home, I'll think about something else.
If you think of stuff you haven't remembered today, just make a little note.
Okay.
We'll do another session.
Okay.
Okay, appreciate you letting us record your memories.
You're
And
most welcome.
I'll send you a link to this when I get it on Facebook.
Okay. You're going to do some editing, I hope.
I am.